survivors, and welcome to First Aid Spray, a Resident Evil podcast by fans for fans. This is episode 59, and in this edition we return to Castle Dimitrescu in third person as an array of new characters, and in the concluding chapter of the Winters story. This is our immediate reaction to Resident Evil Village's The Winters expansion. My name is Sai, and joining me on the panel this week, he's pretty used to having his face hugged, but how does he fare with having it eaten? And better yet, what does it taste like? It's Moist Owlet, aka James.
That's my fetish.
A kitchen full of dolls with blades. It's Kelsey, aka KDB.
Hello.
Like the Executioner, he is also covered in faces, and all of them scream for an RE Classic collection. It's Fire Button Steve Valance.
Hello, everybody.
Every episode of First Aid Spray is recorded live on our Discord server, so join now to hear the show early and unedited and to become part of our fantastic little community where we discuss life, the universe and Resident Evil. You can find a link to the server as well as all of our social media profiles at our website, faspraypod.com. It's the support of our listeners that keeps First Aid Spray going, so why not check out our merchandise or our Patreon page. Tiers begin at just $1 a month. Head over to patreon.com/faspraypod for a full list and the chance to create bonus First Aid Spray content. It's not been very long at all since we did a podcast because of the massive endeavour that was Profile Chris Redfield getting pushed back. So suffice it to say, if you haven't listened to that episode, go and do that and catch up. It is a bit of a monster, but I promise it's worth it. But because it has been not all that long, we haven't put out, rarely, we have not put out that much content. That being said, if you are a Patreon supporter, make sure you go check out our latest bonus episode on Castlevania Symphony of the Night, little known game that is. That was a great, it's a great time. We all thoroughly enjoyed putting that together. Yes, that is Patreon exclusive for the next month, as is a lot of our content. So shout out to our patrons. And there is definitely a wave of content coming soon as well. And that's about it from us, so let's move into a fairly straightforward version of the Biohazard news.
Well, a little-known story, a little-known franchise. Resident Evil has now sold over 131 million copies worldwide.
Yeah, so to put that into a bit of a broader context, Capcom kind of revealing their numbers as they often do. Resident Evil, of course, their best-selling series at 131 million units. Monster Hunter is second, over 88 million, and then Street Fighter under that, over 49 million. 131 million to 88 million is quite a jump. That being said, Resident Evil has been around a lot longer than Monster Hunter, so that's pretty impressive on the Monster Hunter sort of side of things there. But yeah, again, not surprising. It's cool. I don't know if we have a whole lot to say on this. I expect usually when they do these like, here are our latest figures, we'll get like big franchise ones like this, but we'll get individual game updates. And it's been a few months. I think the last one was sort of like June since Capcom updated their platinum titles part of their website. So hopefully some news comes on updated Resident Evil specific sales figures. But Kelsey, what do you make of this? Anything to add to this?
Yeah, I feel like Resident Evil's probably the only thing keeping Capcom from being acquired by a bigger company, because it's just so it's helping them stay self-sustainable, and so it's really good to see. What is interesting is we've had loads of games come out, and then from what I understand is now we're getting like one game come out in the foreseeable, and that's it. Like with Resident Evil. They said that they want to sell another 40 million games in the next year. So they got Street Fighter 6 and then Remake 4. So they'll probably hit it with all the other games they've got as well. But it's just funny thinking about Resident Evil. We've been kind of spoiled. And, unless there is stuff on the horizon. But I think they literally said in this call or thing that they did, they only have one Resident Evil game for the next... one game next year, I think it was.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it is... At this point, after Street Fighter 6 comes out, or has it come out? I don't know. Yeah. But after that, I think it's all looking ahead to Remake 4, so I don't think there's any titles between Street Fighter and that, which is obviously right at the end of March. I think you're right, though. I think they'll hit their targets with it, because obviously that's going to do gangbusters. I mean, generally, we've said it a lot, that we've been spoilt for Resident Evil content since we started the podcast, really. There's been a new game practically every year. This is one of the few years where we haven't had a brand new main kind of game, discounting something like ReVerse, obviously. And again, that was promised last year, so I don't know technically if you can make it count, but nonetheless, I suppose we have had the DLC. So in a weird way, it has been a quieter year this year on the games front. It's just that we've had the show and stuff like that to keep trucking along as well. Steve, any thoughts on this?
I think the day may come when Monster Hunter actually eclipses RE. At the pace it's going, when you think about how many titles RE has, how long RE has been around, Monster Hunter, by comparison, is a late PS2 franchise with only a handful of titles that's obviously come to present day. I feel like there is a chance it may one day catch up to its older brother. I feel like Street Fighter is by the wayside at this point, unfortunately. Generally thinking that if any Resi game is going to push, that 40 million boundary, it is probably going to be RE4. Now, that game has legacy beyond just Resident Evil itself. It will draw in people who are curious about it because they played the old game. But overall, I think Capcom's in an okay place. The only thing I'm kind of puzzled about is we've got like Mega Man titles and other things that just been sat on the back burner, barely get any news. Is it the Mega Man Battle Network collection? I think is the only thing in that franchise we've seen in a million years, and it's not even out yet. And then besides Resident Evil, Street Fighter, there's not really much on the horizon. So
it's true, actually. A lot of their IPs are quite quiet at the moment when you think about it. Because Mega Man, I remembered somewhat recently that they're making a TV show or whatever, or a movie still, apparently. And Devil May Cry has been quiet for a few years after 5, and there isn't anything from a bunch of their major series.
Yeah, there was rumours or confirmations that I don't know if they are rumours because I haven't seen anything sense of like Netflix doing something with Devil May Cry. No idea. Like that would be probably something you'd coincide with a new game release. If you're being tactical about things.
Right, and that is, whilst that's been rumoured or talked about and doesn't seem close to happening, Onimusha's happening, and that's a Capcom property. We know that's getting a show, so that could potentially kickstart some new games in that series. So fingers crossed, I suppose.
Yeah.
James, any thoughts on this?
So there is a commonality between all these games, and especially Resident Evil doing so well. And I'll harp on about it until the end of my days, but it's the fact you can play pretty much every Resident Evil on anything.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And Monster Hunter has only just begun, becoming like an unexclusive game. Right, and it's starting to really ramp up now too with Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Rise is on Steam as well. The more they do that, the more the numbers are just going to keep skyrocketing if they keep making good games. Yeah, I'm very interested to see also how Remake 4 is going to affect those sales. I'm really interested to see how that game does in terms of sales, to be honest, just in general, because I know we kind of all said it already, but I think it's going to be a real hit, that one. Yeah, I think it's going to be even bigger than Remake 2 when it comes out.
Right, I'm really excited to see what the latest up-to-date individual sort of SKU figures are for Resi games, because obviously 7 skyrocketed to the best-selling game in the series as an individual release. And Village did really well in its first few months. Who knows, that might be number 1 and we just haven't found out yet. And they're keeping that trajectory up because, I agree. Remake 4 has the potential to be yet another, smash hit success is a term that gets thrown around a lot. But it could be, yet again, another game that goes straight to the top of their sales of all time. Yeah, iconic, exactly.
He parried a chainsaw with a knife. Oh my god, I must buy this game, said everybody ever.
On every format.
And then every Twitter person's like, this game's too serious. Did you watch that part?
Okay, well, that is it for Resident Evil news. So that means we get to launch into our exciting subject for this podcast, which is, of course, the Winter's expansion. And now, reading the files on the recreation and manipulation of memory and recently written reports from Resident Evil Village in character as Mother Miranda, Carly J, who you can follow on Twitter at CarlyJ_.
I have been experimenting with the possibilities of manipulating and reviving the consciousness stored within the Megamycete. When a person dies, their consciousness is stored and preserved, but over time it becomes diffused and diluted, spread thin throughout the Megamycete and mixed with the other consciousness and memories. Extracting and reassembling an individual who has thus diffused has proved a monumental effort. As an experiment, I decided to see what would happen if I used different individuals' consciousnesses to create an entity. The results were fascinating. I gathered fragments, re-spooled the threads, and succeeded in creating an individual birthed anew in this realm. A success to be sure, but while his unusual physique resembled a man I once knew, he was possessed of a deeply warped psyche, and he was missing a portion of his face. Conclusion. While manipulating memories to create a person as possible, the creations are flawed and unstable. It will not be possible to manufacture a suitable vessel in this way.
So once upon a time, I suppose, Resident Evil Village wasn't meant to have any DLC. That was the story we were told, whether or not that's true. But after the release and the subsequent big success of the game, Capcom went, you know what, maybe we will do something. And we've waited quite a while. The game is now, a year and a half old? Which is quite a long time for a game to get DLC, a first helping of DLC, and obviously first and last. But that has released, 4 or 5 days ago as of recording, for individual purchase on whatever storefront you use, the Winter's Expansion. It also comes packaged with a re-release of Resident Evil Village for Gold Edition. What we're going to do is obviously go through the sort of 3 major parts of the Winter's Expansion and cover it all. But before we actually get into that, let's talk about Gold Edition. I'm kind of curious to see if you guys have any thoughts on this. I use the word controversy lightly because I didn't see a lot of it, but I definitely saw some people taking umbrage with it for good reason, I think. That is to say, Resident Evil Village Gold Edition is essentially a full-priced re-release of the base game in a new box with a new cover, and inside of that box is a DLC code for the new content. It does not come on the disc. It's just a part as a download code. Kelsey, do you have any thoughts on this? Because I personally thought maybe I was just being hopeful that we were getting beyond this kind of thing.
So there's a very important detail I think we need to clarify. I don't think it's full price. I think it's around the £34 mark, which, if that's the case, I'm like a proponent of physical media, and I'm precious about that stuff. But in this case, I'm not that too bothered by it, because what you're essentially buying is a discounted version of Village plus the 15 quid DLC, which, okay, I guess people want the DLC on the disc, but I wasn't surprised to see it come out this way. This is, it's not massively new. This stuff is kind of more and more common. As I say, I'm precious about physical media. This didn't bother me as much as it's bothered some people, because I don't think it is full price. So
just to clarify that, I've just quickly looked it up. The RRP for the UK version on PlayStation 5 is £45, but it is selling on Amazon.co.uk for £40.
Right, okay.
And that seems pretty across the board price-wise.
Okay, all right, so it's pretty up there then. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, then it's incredibly cheeky. I mean, the people are sort of have a right to be annoyed about that. I had never really intended to buy the Gold Edition, so I don't have too much of a dog in the race, I suppose. But
right.
I get it. I get why people are annoyed. It's a shame. We're seeing this all disappear now. Call of Duty just came out with 70 megabytes on the disc. That's like a colossal waste of plastic. For me, that's a bigger issue. And I'm keen to know the cost of these cloud versions as well, because if they're going to be pushing, top dollar, that's going to be a bit cheeky as well. So there's lots of issues, but I already bought Village, so personally it didn't bother me too much.
It's a good point about the cloud versions. James, what are your thoughts on this while I see if I can quickly figure out what the price of that is?
So I agree that we should have more physical media, but I do think it's starting to peter out. In terms of the convenience of it. In defense of this, like the Gold Edition, it was a lot of quote unplanned stuff, and to physically send stuff off Like, it costs a lot of money to do that, and it costs a lot of time. Like, it's extra, right? So I'm wondering if they just decided that we're going to save some money by... Obviously, they're going to save money, but we're going to save money by putting it into a code rather than, like...
Printing a new disc.
Yeah, having a new disc and making that whole thing. Also, I think that wasn't the original game when it first came out, wasn't it like £40-45 as well? I think.
Yeah, probably, to be honest.
I do remember spending that.
It's normally like,
around that.
Yeah, normal-ish prices, and then special editions like way up. It's got like a statue and all these other things.
I do. I'll get into it later on, but in again defense of this game and the new stuff is really good for new players. Like if you come into this game and you've just bought the gold edition, you will be putting those hours in. If you really enjoyed the game. Like, I've put over 100 hours into Village, which means it's paid itself off. For me, like the £1 an hour for my fun, is fine for me, and that's not what everyone goes by. But I do feel with the new Gold Edition stuff and the new DLC and the new stuff they've added in Gold Edition, it is worth it. But it is still, I can't deny it. It still is a little bit sus.
So the Cloud Edition, just for full clarity, right now, because it released on the same day as the DLC, is £32.98 on the Switch store, which is a rather weird price, but there you go. I think that it's a weird one because I don't, like you, Kelsey, this doesn't necessarily affect me. I didn't buy Gold Edition, but I can see the issue with it, and some of my issue with it, I know, is stuff that game companies outright don't care about. Why would they? But for me, it's just the thought of I'm wandering into a second-hand store and I go, oh, Resident Evil Village Gold Edition, and what I'm actually buying is Resident Evil Village. You get a download code that somebody's already used. Of course, companies don't care about that because they don't want you to buy second-hand anyway. But there you go. That's a thing. Steve, what's your thoughts on this?
360 era flashbacks. It's literally that whole
Right,
EA thing where like you buy the game and then here's your online pass that you only use with this card, or here's your pre-order bonus. It's just some gimmick gone. In this case, it's an entire sizable chunk of content though. Like, it's frustrating because, like you said, I mean, it's more of a reseller issue. And I don't think many of us are going to be buying it secondhand at this point. Most people, at least in our circles, would have already had Village and then bought the DLC separately. But anyone who's diving in now, new, if they're getting Gold Edition second-hand, like I said, they're probably getting ripped off, and there's no way to counterbalance that, and that isn't good. I don't like it. I'm pretty sure that like even Gold Edition for RE5 came back, on the 360 era back in the day. That was like a second disc that installed your stuff. So I realise it's expensive to print these things, but I mean, in the interest of game preservation and stuff as well, because it just takes one like up on this server, one kind of internet hiccup, and maybe stuff gets wiped. I don't know. It just seems a bit strange to me not having any kind of preservation for it.
Yeah, that's exact. Preservation is definitely an aspect, certainly. But there you go. At least I thought it was at least worth addressing before we get into the meat of the Winter's expansion. So let's do that now. So, of course, we have the Mercenaries additional orders that bulks out the Mercenaries mode. We have a third-person perspective option to play through the entire campaign. Both things that we'll talk about later. But let's get into the main course, Shadows of Rose. Not Shadow of Rose, Shadows of Rose. I keep saying it wrong. Which is the additional chapters of the story. Takes place in 2037 after Resident Evil Village. That's about 16 years. From the perspective of Rosemary Winters. She's approached by a man named K, who may or may not be K9 from the Hound Wolf Squad. That seems to be the pervading belief, at least. And she's struggling with these superpowers of hers and is looking for a way to get rid of them. And K may or may not have that way. And it sort of involves invading the consciousness of the Mycete, and that's kind of how we get there. So with that story set up, I think as presented as the extra chapters of story, and especially in fact by Capcom as the kind of final chapter of the Winters family story, it makes sense to start with the plot. So Steve, how do you feel about the Shadow of Rose story setup?
The setup where Rose is just walking down and then sees Kay on a bench and goes on a wild ride. It's okay.
With no music in the first cutscene, which threw me off.
The whole thing was kind of unnerving, to be fair, because there was just something very creepy uncle about Kay. It set me off from the get-go. And then the second thing's the plot. So how far are we talking here? Because I don't want to spoil stuff ahead of time.
I'll let you make a judgment call, I guess.
Okay, right.
All right. I mean, I think everyone who knows who's listening to this,
Spoilers. Yeah.
Spoiler
there's going to be
warning.
There's going to be major spoilers.
Big old sweaty spoiler warning right now. We haven't said anything. Here it is.
If you would like to hear us just talk about the other aspects of the DLC, do check the description of this podcast wherever you're listening to it. There will be time codes. Avoid Shadows of Rose if you haven't played it. But sorry, go on, Steve.
It's hard to not talk about this without actually getting into spoilers, because the fact that it's all a ruse by basically the hard copy memory of Miranda in a Megamycete USB stick, for want of a better term, and she cons her. It's kind of interesting because it leads into the whole, in the end of RE7, the whole point is revealed that there's hallucinations and stuff's not necessarily what Ethan is seeing is real, and it's part of the whole Megamycete mind control stuff. The fact that that's a late game reveal in Shadows of Rose, which points that the whole motivation is awesome. I love that throwback that, if you've been reading and know what this stuff's capable of, that's kind of cool. That being said, it is a bit like wizardry, and it felt like at times, especially midway through, what's that? Is it Labyrinth, where a child's kidnapped by David Bowie? Yeah, Labyrinth. Yeah. It felt like I was playing some kind of video game rendition of that through a Resi lens.
Interesting.
It's a strange concept to get across, but yeah, it felt like I was in Labyrinth at times, especially the way that Rose was talking and cursing things. The whole concept where she's got to go in here to cure herself, I feel like this is a story that probably could have been approached with other Resident Evil characters in the past. This seems like the kind of thing a Sherry would do, would get rid of the G-Virus out of the system. But going into the memory of it allows for basically Resident Evil's the evil within. And in that regard,
Steve, you've stolen my angle.
I don't want to I don't want to talk about every single plot point and be the first foray in. So by all means, Kels, you can take over from me. Fine.
No, before I talk, I was just going to say it's funny because I have notes I've kind of centered quite a bit on character, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this concept of the Mycete quite a bit. So I don't know. I'm not going to jump ahead to that just yet.
All right, that's fair.
But yeah, I'll just pick up. It's funny because I wrote at the top, it's Shadows of Rose, aka the Resident Evil Within, which I mean, I don't think I've ever been more conflicted about something Resident Evil than I am with this story. It has interesting mythology building, which I'm sure we're going to talk about in a bit, but I think that sort of hocus pocus stuff is it's I want to focus more on the thing that I find most compelling, which is the character stuff. And Rose has been, bullied, and she wants to fit in and not be a freak, and wants to get rid of her powers, and she must dive into this consciousness dreamland to find a crystal. I'm going to be honest, it didn't grab me. When I hear kind of powers and crystal and consciousness, I'm sort of already thinking, ooh, where's this going? But when it comes to Rose and this setup, I'm not really into the I'm a freak and want to fit in trope. Feels a bit out of touch with things in the real world these days. But my main question is, where's Mia? Rose is kind of walking around freely, and so she's not in any kind of government prison. So I really want to know what happened with the relationship with Mia to make Rose kind of feel so unsupported and alienated. And I think Mia missing from the story leaves some big gaps in me getting on board with Rose's plight. I think if Mia had died at the end of Village, maybe I'd feel a bit different. But are we supposed to be blaming Mia in some way, or I don't know? And why has Chris not been looking out for her? These are kind of questions that I've got. And then she makes that kind of stupid decision to just kind of jump into this fungus based on a single conversation with Kay, and chaos ensues.
I guess so. To jump off a few things you said there, to me it was implied that Chris is still around because obviously she's having this conversation with Kay about the Hound Wolf Squad and all that. So Chris is still a part of her life, maybe a father figure if you want to read into it that much. I agree about the absence of Mia explanation is a shame, but I kind of expected that because, I mean, they village danced around it as well. I mean, she's a bioterrorist in Resident Evil 7, but no, she goes under witness protection and she just kind of gets away with it, and they just kind of glossed over her again, which is a shame because, again, if this is the final chapter, it would have been nice to have a little bit more on her, what's happened to her, and close it up a little bit, unfortunately. But I don't know, maybe Rose's willingness to go along with this just is meant to show her desperation to change these things about herself. And I thought Rose was fun. I liked having to, play through a story with her. I liked, and it is a little bit tropey of I'm the weirdo and I want to get rid of what makes me weird and sort of coming around to it. But I did like the way they plotted it out throughout the game where she's kind of expressing how cool her powers were and, being impressed by what she can do. Even though we all inevitably knew that she was going to end up keeping them. I don't think this is the end for her necessarily either, to be fair. But to speak on some positives, because I certainly have some issues. I thought the opening was beyond the first cutscene, which left me with some big questions about Hound Wolf Squad that are apparently still active in 16 years' time. Have fun committing to that idea, Capcom, because you've done it now. I liked the opening part, skulking around the dungeons. In fact, all of the Castle D stuff was really cool with all these coming across. So Capcom are usually pretty awful at showing too much in the final trailer, and they did a little bit of that for me, but I was quite surprised with some of the creepiness of all these failed Rose clones that are dying and hanging off the walls and stuff like that. It was a really cool imagery, and the dungeon stuff where you come across them to begin with and they're all sort of like being attacked, and I liked all of that stuff. There was some stuff early on that actually almost felt like nods to Village's past a little bit. So the first time that you come across the Executioner, as I believe he's called, it's actually where you come across one of the daughters for the first time as well. It's like, that's kind of neat mirroring of things. But yes.
How much of it would you consider like asset reuse with a bit of like artistic flair? It's an elephant in the room because that is Castle D. That there is no question. And
I have a whole thing on that, certainly. I actually think the asset reuse is really, really good, but I'm going to definitely get into that later. I'm actually pretty happy with what they've done in that kind of circumstance.
The bit that puzzles me is I haven't unlocked Lady D in additional orders, but I'm assuming she has voice lines. James, does she have like any kind of like quips?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right, she does. She chatteth the Right, okay. So,
something like that.
Then they get banged.
Listen, it's not chatting it's just goblin noises.
Well, all right. The point is, they obviously they got. I'm sorry, her name escapes me. They got Maggie Robinson, I believe. Right, they got her back in to voice her, and it's her castle, but she doesn't play any role in this at all, despite the fact that this basically being a ghost hard drive filled with. Spoiler warning again, for some reason, just to say Evelyn's in there. As well as Miranda. So why is it that they've obviously had someone in to do these voices? They've used her setting, and that she's not even in it. And she's like the marketing darling for Village. That puzzles me a little bit.
I can answer that.
Go for it. Yeah, go for it, James.
So we're in a fractured Megamycete. Actually, we're in like a fraction. Like we're not even. It's a very small part of it. Like it's, and again, we'll go over more about it later on, right? But that's why everything looks the same. But there are very big differences to every room, like and it makes sense because you're in a part of the Megamycete, a very small part that is going to be all scrambled up, and it's kind of been all made by Miranda and kind of been ish, and the Megamycete and the other souls, essences, memories, whatever you want to call them, that are in there, right? So that's the way I've been looking at it. Because you're right, it would have been nice to have Lady D in there, right? But I think they wanted to go in a different direction, right? And they wanted to bring, everybody loved the Duke, and when he turned up, I was like, ooh, where's this gonna go? I was very interested in that. I also feel like Lady D, even though she was a big selling point of the game, I think it's well known to everybody, with Village, that people were pretty underwhelmed by her in the game and what she's capable of. So they might have taken that on and be like, okay, we're just going to put all of the talent into additional orders, put it all in there, and we're going to make something new for the castle itself.
The thing that puzzles me now is, like, it actually helped me recontextualize some of Village's main plot points as to why Miranda basically says, Ethan, go kill these 4 lords for us, youth, cheers. Right? Adding them to the Megamycete now has some kind of context, as she has, like, a ghost hard drive of every soul who's ever died near it or something, right? And then they're not used in it. It just seems a bit of a shame. I mean, I get why Moreau isn't there. He's a cheese-eating freak. He is the best, but he's also a cheese-eating freak. I get why Heisenberg isn't there, because he hates Miranda. He wouldn't want to be around. But she was also kind of like the one who was most loyal to her. Seems a bit of a shame. It's a shame.
I do feel like them not expanding on lore for the lords was a misstep.
You could argue it's because she's not really dead. Dun dun dun, or something. But I don't think that's happening anytime soon. Somehow.
Yeah. Can I do my bit, because we've all brought up stuff, and
James, please do.
I think I can answer most of your questions. Welcome to the Q&A with me, James. Right, so we're all up in contention, and even I was up in contention whether K9 was a real person. He is a real person, and he is still alive. There is, and it's not because of some rough translations or anything like that. At the end of the game, Miranda says that K was an illusion. Also, at the beginning of the game, Rose mentions to K. Let me find my. Yeah, she says, I'm paraphrasing here, but when she's talking to K, she said she refers to them as you and the Hound Wolf Squad. Like, she refers to them as that. So he's still around. With those 2 pieces of information, he's still around.
Yeah.
We know
and
that.
I think there's a line somewhere, and I apologise that I don't have fuller context for it, but rather than specifically, I think it's Miranda, she doesn't specifically say people that have died. It's anyone that's gotten close enough to the Megamycete that it kind of like starts to pick up on their memories, and I guess that's why she can project someone like Kay, who is still alive, because he was there in the village when it was all going on, and he got sort of like, I don't know, he touched some of it in some fashion.
Oh, the thing is, we know that they went there 16 because they mention it. They went there and collected. You know, when we were all wondering, what was Chris doing during all this time when Ethan was getting to Miranda? That's what
samples.
they were doing.
I mean, they literally take samples, don't they?
The sample.
Yeah, we see that they've been down near the route, don't we? So.
The other thing is, I was because of all this. This was kind of more interesting for me, but I think it's just because of what I said. I think it's been completely debunked now. But it was very interesting to think like if K9 did die near the Megamycete or not. And she was using that, but we learned later on that was not the case.
The theme starts playing. Turns out he's been evolving along for 16 years.
The other thing that was up for contention with me and might be up for other people's contention, because I always think about, like, if I'm thinking it, other people might be thinking it, is the lab itself. And the fact we know that K9 is alive, means that, that lab was real. Everything was real there. I know it might sound obvious to a lot of people, but it's just so to clarify things down, because I think this story where you mess with, there are 2 stages to this story. There are what happens in the real world and what happens, and I think we need to have a definite boundary there for that. And I also want to mention, before I go any further, I also want to mention that this is the first time that Resident Evil has become an isekai anime. Like, it was actually Berger that brought this up to me, right? I was like, holy crap! Like, and for those that don't know what an isekai is, it's a genre of anime where somebody from like a normal world that we would present as normal, like, is transported into another world of some kind, right? And it's very common in anime, right? And it's, to be honest, it's a surprise that it's taken this long for Resident Evil to have something like that. Yeah, I also agree. I hate that there's barely any Mia involvement. In fact, I remember, like, it wasn't. I'm pretty sure Rose was just taken from Mia. Like, she was taken from Mia, which was why, like, she has all these kind of, like, she's really pent up, and like, because she hasn't really had a childhood. I mean, she's still a child, really. She's still a child in Shadows of Rose, as well. overall, like, before I go into kind of one of my biggest things that I think is super interesting but can also be shot down really fast. Overall, I really did like the story. The crystal thing was dumb. I don't get why you would have to go through the Megamycete to get something that is incorporeal to help you.
The
Like,
evil
no
witch
sense.
tricks the dumb teenager.
Like, it would have made, it would have made way more sense if it was like, okay, the secrets are inside the Megamycete and you need to find it, but it's not a dumb crystal. It's like something else. I don't know. Like, they could literally, but they made it out like it was this physical thing. And it didn't make much sense. So that, going back to my earlier point about setting a clear boundary between the real world and this Megamycete world, right? They didn't even follow their own guidelines, and that kind of sucked because like, the story itself was really cool. I overall, I liked it. I liked what they did. I liked that it was they could have done other things, but it was a send off for Rose and Ethan. And I'm not gonna lie that I didn't cry, like, because man, that when Ethan is at the end and he runs ahead of you and he just starts blasting these face suckers around you, like, it really got me going. And then there was another bit at the end where she says, I'm gonna do this, I was like, oh my god, I'm just gonna bawl my eyes out now. But yeah, so I could go on forever because I think there is a lot to this DLC, but there is a lot of problems with it as well, and the main problem is that crystal. Also the Houndwall squad. So the Houndwall squad is interesting. And you can judge a lot by what you see in the DLC. So we see a very haggard and tired Kay. And from what I said previously, we know that K9 is still alive and he's still of the Houndwall squad, right? But he's doing inactive work. He's doing lab work. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it could mean that the Houndwall squad has expanded into something else now.
Yeah,
like
sure.
Chris could be operations.
Right.
And the other crew could be part of other, so they could be doing other stuff. They could be another organization, which is something they've set. I think Capcom's done that deliberately, right? So they can, so they can do stuff with it.
I actually, like, as much as I made fun of it, if this is actually the opportunity for, and this is, big pipe dream, but if this is Chris's retirement plan, then like, as a character, then I'm actually more than fine with it. If, like, RE9 is kind of like the swan song, and then from there he becomes sort of like this person overseeing the Houndwolf squad, which becomes a bigger thing, that would be great, and I'm happy with that. But if the idea is that he's still taking missions 16 years later as part of this little group, that's a bit silly to me. But we don't know for sure because they were very unspecific on purpose, obviously, I'm sure.
Obviously, this whole, like, the Megamycete and everything, I think its strongest point is how vague it is. And they've done that. And they've done that.
Oh boy!
Oh dear!
They've done that deliberately because it is something that is new. It's a new kind of experience as a new being in this universe. And I know it's a bit like fantasy-esque, right? But you're talking to James.
A bit.
Like,
I mean, we've already
love fantasy.
mental
One thing is, like,
copies
when
and
you
stuff.
go. I don't know, if you watch interviews about people who have taken hard drugs and stuff, it gets wild.
Yeah.
Your mind does some weird stuff. So if you have a being which is nothing but that wild stuff, where anything is possible within that, but I can understand it being hard to grasp. Now, my final point about the story, and it's kind of story-ish, and I think, again, because I think the one thing I've kind of lauded this game and the previous game and the DLC on is how it's tied in the original games without it being too damaging to the original canon, while also creating an avenue for people to go down in the future in Capcom. And this is going to sound weird how I start this off, but I don't know if anybody's ever... I said this while I was playing this game in the channel, but the damage from the face... Are they called face suckers? What are they called?
Face eaters, I think.
Face eaters. The damage that the face eaters cause... And we're gonna go far here, right? But so stay with me. They look like the outside of paper wasp nests.
Right.
I know. Somebody's already left. Those nests are made from dead wood and plant stems. Okay. I wonder. Firstly, I wonder if they took inspiration from them. Additionally, these kind of nests are known as umbrella nests. This is on the wiki, right? And hives and labs we've seen in the game and movies have hive-like features. This could potentially be another reference to how the origins of Umbrella began. Again, knowing Spencer spent quite a long time studying with Miranda. It's a wild theory, very wild. And listen, I didn't even have to. I was like, oh, they look similar. I just Googled it, and oh, they're also known as umbrella nests. Dun dun dun. I was like, this
That's
could be
fun.
really. It could be, yeah. It could be like a fun little connection. But yeah, I think. Oh yeah, and there's also just this is not as big. I don't know how to really. When I was writing this, I didn't really know how to put it into a paragraph, right? Or what to make of it. But I think it's very strange that we never see Rose actually use powers. We only ever see Rose use powers in the Megamycete.
Right, not in the real world, yeah.
Which technically means we've never seen Rose use her powers. We know she sweats white milk. I don't know. Like, we know, she has a strength to her because we saw it at the end of Village and the end of the DLC.
It's a very good point, actually, now that you mention it. In the sense that, like, she discovers her power. Like, when she starts doing these things, she's like, wow, I did that. It's like, well, how aren't you coming here because you've got weird powers? So what are your weird powers if not this? Other than, as you say, milk sweat.
I would have loved like maybe a montage or something, like, or like maybe she just finished a mission with Hound Wolf or something, so we could have got those powers. But it makes me question her powers in general, or whether she's just being told she has powers.
You're a 16-year-old teenager who sweats milk. If you're told, "Can I have a cure for sweating milk?" I'm pretty sure even I'd go for the mutated demon hard drive. I don't want to sweat no milk. That's weird. That's creepy. No wonder people are taking the out of me.
But my ending note is basically I don't think we've seen what Rose is truly capable of yet at all. We haven't seen it. Like, I think whatever we saw in the Megamycete is whatever manifested within the Megamycete. Like me asking for Bloodborne every year. We'll never get it, right? But she did, right? She had her manifesting moment, right? But we've never seen it outside of the Megamycete. I think that's really interesting.
Okay, well, I'm really glad that you got a lot of positive stuff and ideas in there, because I am now going to give my opinion on the story of this DLC, and I'm going to be very straightforward with it. It's crap.
Agreed.
I don't like it. And it is the big dumb. No, I mean, it's really hard to critique a story that is this out there. And when you critique something, you have to critique it with the framework that it exists in. Which, for the Megamycete at this point, is just, I am a big blob that serves cool set pieces up. Resident Evil Village's story was full of questions without answers, for better or for worse. This didn't answer any of them. It just made everything even more confusing. I'm so lost at what the Megamycete does, what Miranda was up to. All of this is just nonsense to me at this point. So if I understand it correctly, Miranda dies in Village, sets to work over the course of 16 years, creating copies of Rose, obviously to make Eva, which is her main goal. But she figures out she needs the real thing. So she finds Rose in the real world, despite the fact that she's in a little bit of the Megamycete. She can see the real world, I guess, or because I guess Rose is connected to the Mycete, so I guess that makes sense. And she can project Kay. How does she? Is all the Megamycete dead at the end of the DLC? Is it just this one bit? How was that one bit there? Did she put it there? Did Hound Wolf Squad put it there? Where did she get it from? How did she know it was there if she didn't put it there? Where was Rose taken? Is Miranda dead? What's stopping her from coming back? She's died twice already. She could just go round and round in circles. I don't really understand where the end points on these things.
So the Megamycete at the end, if you watch when she's leaving the lab,
it's all shriveled up and dead.
It's like it looks inert, yeah.
Right, so does this mean all of it across the world, wherever these samples are now dead? Because, or as you said, quite rightfully, which I hadn't thought about, this little part that Miranda's kind of occupied and been able to change to her will, is it just this part that's dead? I don't know.
Can I
didn't
wade in?
Go on, Steve.
For 2 seconds.
please.
RE7's mold was a mind control and other things activity, right? That the main reason Evelyn was to do is go in and pacify population and mind control them, basically to make them be non-combatants, which means that they have some kind of linked neural network. It's not too far to extrapolate that every piece of the Megamycete, Mutamycete isn't in some way connected. I know it's a stupid, hokey-pokey kind of way.
I would assume so.
It says that in notes.
Yeah.
It literally says that in the game, yeah.
So, as tedious as it is, it could be a case of just because Rose was or is some part mold, that Miranda is in a piece of the mold and can therefore get at it. And hopefully that means she's now dead and gone because she's killed her inside the Mutamycete itself. But what's stopping her coming back from like another layer of the...
Exactly, and this is why where your question about Lady D... whilst I'm fine with her not being in the DLC or whatever, I like that they did something different.
I don't like the character, but why she wasn't there, I don't know if the rules are.
Exactly, because we don't know what the rules are. Why wouldn't she be there? If this is not Miranda's little zone and it's actually connected to the rest of the Megamycete, why can't anyone just stroll in? Why couldn't the real Duke just push the doors open and be like, "Yo, I'm here"? You know, it's very confusing. I don't really know what's going on. And more than beyond just being confused by the story, I thought the return of Mother Miranda was just a bit like, oh, okay. I was looking forward to something kind of original. And especially after the Evelyn return, which I thought was amazing.
Yeah.
This felt like a bit of a repeat, but now it has Kamehameha at the end. Which,
Again,
do a
I
whole
know
lot for me.
I know I mentioned Bloodborne earlier on, but man, the ending of this game is... Right, Steve?
Visually, it's stunning.
The pale blood moon?
I felt like I was in...
so Bloodborne.
Yeah, I was in Bloodborne meets Evangelion meets Resident Evil, which are three things that probably should never meet, but it looked cool.
Just to sort of sum it up, this is, and everyone's kind of got their end point of, we will argue this point to the cows come home about where you think the pseudoscience ends with Resident Evil, but this is the supernatural jump of the shark for me. Yeah. I can forgive this because it's self-contained and it's okay. I just don't want any more of this, unfortunately. It all just feels like an excuse for some funky gameplay pieces without really much sense. Everyone's going to have a different thing. You're all right, as far as I'm concerned, but this is just my take on it. I just would like... It's fine as it is. I just don't want any more of this, please. Sorry, I feel like I've just ranted a bunch. Kelsey, you've been mostly quiet, but I feel like you're erring on a similar side.
Yeah, we've kind of, I do appreciate like how James has gone through and sort of danced around all the different things because there's some awesome stuff in there. The Wasp's Nest thing is awesome. I just wanted to say that. But I'm like 99% in agreement with you, Si. I tried to sort of ease into it at the start, saying I had questions and things, but I'm not a fan of the story. I think I'm just going to, because we've danced around, rather than just sort of retort, I'm just going to go through a few of my bullet points. Ethan and Rose are Miranda and Evelyn, so this is where I get really kind of conflicted. Towards the end, when Ethan is revealed to be Michael, we get some beautiful character moments and exchanges between them, which is the kind of character stuff that I like. And with the right depth, it would have also had me crying as well. But the whole thing is just undermined by... the fact that it's taking place in Dreamland, and this is where the science versus fantasy stuff bites it in the ass for me. And I'm watching it and thinking, does any of this sort of have any real weight? Because anything can happen in this consciousness land, and I'm not even really sure what's happening, why it's happening, if everyone's who they say they are. And I don't know if anyone saw the trailer for the new Ant-Man film, but it made me think of that, where they go to the quantum realm and it's like, oh yeah, this is fun and looks nice, but what's the rules here? And can anyone just die and come back to life? And what's the stakes?
Not to completely cut you off, but what, like, when you say about rules and stuff like that, and we were talking about the crystal, again, it's like Ethan's able to make healing items and ammo appear, but because the story says no, he can't make the crystal appear. Yeah. And his powers just stop at this point because the story says so. Exactly. Whereas we've never had that in Resident Evil 4, which is why it's jarring. But sorry, go on.
Yeah.
Can I just add on to that?
Yeah.
A little bit of defense, though I'm like 60% agreement. If you go into one of the side rooms in the Lady D castle, Castle D, he does say that the more he does this, the weaker he gets. and that's just bringing ammo about. So I again the rules are
Sure.
like wibbly
storyline
wobbly, so-
convenience.
Exactly,
Exactly.
Si. And so I do sort of have a point about that later, where it was kind of like with the Netflix show, where it's like just because they sort of say it doesn't necessarily make it work for me. I think bringing both Ethan and Miranda back cheapened the end of Village for me as well. I thought Miranda actually had some really cringy dialogue, and a lot of her like mysticism vanished for me, and it became quite theatrical. And it's just like, again, what was the point in killing her if she's just shape-shifting out in the real world? And, we can explain it away with this deep lore, but on the surface, it just made me kind of go... It made her go from one of my favourite villains down to sort of a few ranks down the tier. And I was eye-rolling at the convenience of everything. Now... The weird thing here for me is Evelyn, because the same stuff does apply to her, but I do think including her worked so much better than Miranda and Ethan, because that felt like even though she gets brushed aside like in the fight and stuff, it felt like that was the proper connecting thread back to 7, which helped wrap up the story. And a big thumbs up for the Evelyn appearance, but even though it was in Dreamland.
I think that works in the favour of it's the Megamycete. Anyone who's in there can show up at any time. Like, that's why it's okay. It's like, well, this actually makes sense for her to show up because she's going to be pissed off at Rose for stealing her sort of quote-unquote family.
Yeah, exactly. I think, and like with Ethan, I think many people were in agreement that at the end of Village, he had gone from like zero to hero, and his appearance in this DLC made me sad, and not because of the story, because it made me realise that we had maybe one of the best new franchise characters ever, and he's dead and isolated to this vacuum of a story now, and he could have perhaps been a part of a new brood of characters or been in a couple more games, and seeing him here just kind of made me think I really wish he didn't die. He achieved hero status, and I know it was sort of through sacrifice, but he's locked into this consciousness of a fungus for all eternity, and it just kind of makes me a bit sad. I think Ethan as a character became a revelation for the series in the end, and if this is how his story is ending, like, I'm glad I got to see him again, but the franchise booked themselves into a corner here, and it was really... I don't want to say the word silly, but I found myself not being happy with the route it took, and I think they've maybe done a disservice to themselves. I know we still have Rose, she's still alive, but I didn't come away being enamoured with her character, and for a franchise that's known for dragging out characters, I do think maybe Ethan has been killed off too early, which is a big takeaway I had from this DLC. A couple of last points about the Mycete stuff, and then I'll stop rambling. I know I've touched on how the game kind of goes out of its way to explain this concept, which is like, okay, fine. But for me, it's not what I'm looking for in Resident Evil, and that's a personal thing. I didn't enjoy it in the moment. It's sort of verging on a level of sci-fi and fantasy that I'm not crazy about. It's establishing new rules, which is a really big ask. And it's, as I said, it's not clear what these rules are. And stuff being ambiguous, like James said, is cool. But you have to have the ground rules, and the ground rule of like, well, it stores memories sort of wasn't enough for me. And I think it hits you with a file right at the start where it starts loading these big concepts at you of how it works. And right away, I just thought it's taking its feet off the ground. And for like the third time in the franchise's series, we're jumping the shark again. And I'm not super jazzed about it. Now, to counteract, to kind of contradict myself, there's nothing inherently wrong with that sort of concept, but like I said, we're crossing a boundary which is more suited to other franchises for me. We keep mentioning Bloodborne. I mean, there's an example. But this is a bit too much like use the Force, Luke, for me. And I don't dislike the stuff in general. I love Star Wars, but I think RE should sort of maybe pick a lane. And yeah, I don't want to harp on about it. I've made it clear in the past that I'm a nerd for deep lore, but I do think the story went off the rails. It throws in loads of this explainer dialogue, and I think just because it does that, it doesn't necessarily mean that it makes sense and works. And yeah, it's a shame. I was worried about Village going a fantasy route before launch, but it kind of didn't. And I sort of, even though with the questions, the could-do stuff felt a little bit more tangible. Here was just way too much sparkle and mystical powers for my liking. And I think, yeah, I'm happy for Resident Evil to evolve, but the ground rules are being broken here. And yeah, it's for my personal taste, it's just been, those rules have been kind of bent way too far for me to enjoy it. So I wasn't a fan of the story. TLDR.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Like, I mean, I'd be open to this kind of thing if they just kind of like were very specific in how they explained what it is and how it worked. Like, so there was something to grasp onto. I just feel like I have no foothold in what the Megamycete was, where it came. Like, I don't understand it at all at this point, which is fine because I guess I assume we're not going back to it, but who knows?
Would you guys be okay with like more information about the Megamycete in future games?
I mean,
it has so many moves now. It feels like it's time to break the death doll out and get rid of the mold.
I'm slightly worried that if it is a really interesting concept in theory that has like a bunch of cool application they could do, but because we keep getting rooms full of lore and stuff, I just worry dump trucks full of information is just going to make it too complex, trying to over explain it almost, because they've made it so powerful that it's like, well, now we need to box it back in. It's like I don't know. Yeah, well, it's a tricky one.
That's the thing about this, is that you can do anything with it. It's like a piece of Play-Doh, like in terms, but with like a dreamscape. Like you can do anything with it.
Yes.
Which is what I've enjoyed the most, but other people have not.
Yeah.
I do agree though that this DLC has broken its own rules. The big one was the crystal. Like it didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
No, I like, it's the biggest problem with me. Like it's like, that's why I love the original game, is because the original game, it just like touched on those things, and it was like, okay, this is what's possible, and we don't want to go too deep into it. We want you to make, that's what I was getting from it anyway. We want you to make your own conclusions. But yeah, this DLC, that was a big one, because I think everything else makes sense.
We now need Shadows of Rose, where it's revealed that this is all her dealing with her being fractured into 4 pieces as a child and then recompiling the trauma. It's all in her own head, all making up this all nonsense. And the mold is just this weird goop that you can mind control people with. Maybe.
I actually, you just reminded me of another note I put down. Another really cool thing. I'm gonna, just to outweigh the negatives. Another really cool thing about this game is, like, throughout the game you're finding notes, and it's of the shadows telling the previous shadow of where they got to, like, and helping them where they, like, I found that really dope. I remember finding the first note and going, "What? Am I talking to myself? What is this?" And then when I met I call them Shrine Maidens because they look like Shrine Maidens from Dark Souls 3. But
funny
they
that.
do, right? But when we got deeper into it, I started seeing those notes, and it was like, oh, I almost got there. You can try. You can do your. It was like they were trying to egg each other on. It was very sweet. The other, like, I think it was Yellow Gem actually who mentioned this. Like, oh wait, no, somebody else. But it made me cry even more, because it was like, Ethan has been watching his daughter and helping his daughter, shadows of his daughter, try and defeat, like, the main bad guy for like 16 years.
Yeah, we don't know how long that Miranda's been, like, actively doing the whole Duke torture sessions, but it's been pretty freaking
It shows you said that, yeah. Sorry. I mean, yeah, true. I mean, it could have just been turned on or whatever, but it's like, I assume it's for 16 years, because this thing, was on. Somebody put the plug switch in on the Megamycete. It was there.
Have you plugged in the nightmare mold, Kay? Yeah, mate.
It's even sadder of a story in a way when you think about that. You think, that's why he was willing to do anything for the real complete mental image of what Rose was.
Well, allow me to give you
Sorry,
some
I was going to say, Steve, please.
I need to give James some happy ending closure, because Miranda could project Kay. We now know how she sees Ethan at the end, and that Ethan's probably projecting from the same USB stick directly at her. So you're right, how you doing? I'm Ethan. I'm not dead, but dead. Hi. I'll help you with the homework.
That's a good point. It is interesting that they didn't build upon that epilogue. I think everyone was waiting to see if there was going to be an additional shot or scene after that.
Face reveal.
But right. But I suppose technically, when you think about it in that way, at least it makes it a little bit nicer. You're right. We've all ranted and raved. Steve, have you got any other points about the story?
See, I totally take on board everyone's like Sai and Kelsey's criticism because I am truly more of a science than a fantasy guy. I kind of internally hand wave it away. This is whole dream logic nonsense that's just trapped in its own mindscape, and Miranda's bonkers, so who gives a frig? Like, you know, she can interact with like other mold people and mess with them, but that's about as far as it goes. She can't be like literally a malevolent mold USB stick to take over the world from death. I mean, This is a franchise that's done some weird things in the past. We've had incestuous clone twins that have like plant powers. I mean, admittedly, that's more grounded in weird viral science, but yeah. I mean, we've had mind swapping with, admittedly, that's with technology overriding someone else's brain. It's just, there is a lot of crazy things in the Resident Evil universe. I like Rose as a character, but you could read pretty much how every story beat was going to go. The only disappointing thing was that you had the Beneviento house instead of the Baker house for Evelyn, and I can reveal that it's actually been her. Because, I mean, the voice actresses, I believe, are the same for her and Angie as well. Yep. So we kind of... I was expecting the doll to show up, but no. Lol, it's Evelyn. Like, oh, okay.
I thought that was really smart.
Yeah.
It was really clever.
I would have had, like, something peel away to reveal, like, I don't know, the living room in the Baker house or something.
That'd be so cool.
That would have been great, Steve.
Because Evelyn versus Rose is something that I would have looked... I'm glad we got, because that feels like that's the most on point for the DLC for me. Michael, as Ethan... No one on this earth didn't see that coming from a million miles away. You know, oh my god, could it be? Really? Like, even the text they use is it's telling of the way that his character is written in the main game. You know,
you could read it in his voice.
You can hear Todd Soley say those lines.
Yeah.
Miranda herself, just complete nonsense madness villain at this point. Like, literally trying to take over another teenager. It's just. You know, as the main instigator of it all, to basically be a Devil May Cry Dragon Ball fight at the end.
Yeah.
It bleeds away and ruins the mechanics the game set up. So what? Because I mean, she's basically got the mold used as defense items, basically, and slow down stuff. And then all of a sudden, it's teleporting, launching like mold smashes and things. It's not quite the same. Feels like we're playing a different game at the end. Doesn't really feel like an earned payoff. And then there's the Duke. Which is just a photocopy of the other Duke. He's not actually got anything to do with it. And everyone's like, what's the lore behind the Duke?
Missed opportunity.
You're not getting it here. Instead, he's just a weird fake copy sex pest thing.
Fucking hell.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, well, I guess we can't obviously, like, there's a lot to dig into there. I think we've done pretty well considering we need to talk about other aspects of the DLC, such as the gameplay. Let's divide this into two parts because I think that's probably fair because the DLC is very easy to separate into sort of more an action-packed part where you're wandering around the castle, and then the second half as well. But let's talk about that first part where you kind of get more of an opportunity to wield Rose's abilities, deal with these new face-eating enemies and that kind of stuff. For me, you know, I thought their abilities were pretty fun to use. I played through the game twice. On my second run, I used them a lot on hardcore mode to escape multiple enemies and not fight, which felt very cool. Felt very sort of old school Resi in a way. Whereas on my first playthrough, I just shot everything, froze them and shot them. New enemies are pretty fun. They're terrifying. The noises they make are horrific in the best way. And the puzzles, you know, simple as they are, I enjoyed them in sort of a homely way. Like the painting thing felt very homely. And was like, this is very Resident Evil, isn't it? So, overall, it was nice to return to the castle and do a few different things, I think. Steve, what did you make of Castle D?
No real complaints actually playing the game. You know, the narrative aside, the game itself was quite enjoyable, I thought. Very on point.
Yeah, agreed.
The only issue I have really is I would have taken the mold powers and put them on a cooldown as opposed to you have to eat a white herb because the resources and need for use sometimes didn't really match up for me. So yeah, other than that, great.
Right.
Yeah, the puzzles were really, I thought actually a little bit more teasery off the brain. And there's the whole escape room, obviously, which we'll get to in a bit. But even before then, you have the Duke showdown where you basically have to figure out which ones are fake and which ones aren't before you get murdered, like that bit in Never Ending Story with the horse.
Yeah. That was different. Certainly, I failed at least once on that bit, but yeah, it's neat. I like it because it's different.
Yeah.
It's a new contribution
For a DLC that only has 2 new enemy types, really. That's pretty good. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, two that you can fight. There's the stuff in the Beneviento house, but that's.
Yeah.
But mechanically, fine. I feel like if they were ever going to go a horror route, this plus fixed camera angles would be banging. Honestly.
Yeah, that's fair. It's got a definite vibe to it, doesn't it? I think the castle is a little bit darker as well, which certainly helps kind of like bring a mood and change it up and feel a little bit different. Plus the fact that you kind of got to get around rooms using the sclerotia sort of like to clear a path. It was a fun sort of remix of stuff. James, how did you find the first part gameplay wise?
It's so there were two clear ideas that they were having with this DLC. The first part being combat orientated or avoidance.
Yeah.
And the second half, which we'll talk about in a bit, was different. It was kind of cool. I like that the face eaters they kind of had a unique moveset, but it was also felt very similar, like to stuff I've seen before in Resident Evil.
Yeah.
But they felt quite unique. I remember the first time I turned a corner and I saw one just sucking the face off of like a shadow. I was like, "What the heck is this?" Like that's scary as hell. Like I was looking at. I didn't even want to interrupt. I was like, I don't know. Should I kill the rose or like should I? I didn't even try. I think I just ran away and then like eventually it stopped what it was doing. Right. But yeah, terrifying. There are a lot of moments in this DLC where they've really leaned into the horror aspect. They said with the the lead up to this game that it is going to be much more horror orientated, and they're completely right. They've done really well with the horror aspect of it. The boss that you fight in Castle D, some people had problems with it. I didn't really have much problems with it. It felt pretty cookie cut to me.
Yeah.
Where you're just running around and you're just waiting until it gets tired and then you shoot it several times. And yeah, I kind of trivialized that in hardcore as well. The boss look was terrifying. It had a bunch of little baby Beneviento faces on it, which is interesting. Again, kind of lending to my theory that this is not kind of a theory. This is a fractured universe, as it were, where things are just kind of muddled up.
James, it's been a hot minute, right? But you've played this on hardcore as well. Would you say that guy feels like move-wise like the execution from RE5? Because it feels like he is like he's using those moves, but obviously in the RE engine.
That is, very accurate, I think.
Yeah. Theories abound.
No, I don't mean it is the RE5 execution. I mean,
so that's it. Yeah, I think that's what you're saying. I'm gonna stick in a YouTube video.
Sure. Plaga 2.0 is now the mold as well.
It was a lackluster boss, but I feel like the actual the challenge of Castle D was either wanting to avoid or fight the face eaters. That was the main challenge of it, and it was really cool to kind of and even your the resources were very limited. And even your special powers were limited. I actually said way earlier, I was like, oh, they're giving us this thing. I bet we're going to have to use a resource or something later on, right? And lo and behold, we did.
I mean, there's not even like a melee option, is there?
No melee and no guard as well.
I tried to use that so many times and it got F for it. I found that the way that you leveled up was a bit silly, though I really want one of those blue canisters. Of course, I'm like a moth when it comes to anything blue. But the name of them is really silly. It's like RW variant 1 something. Like, it's like, okay, that's a little bit on the nose and strange. That was another thing that kind of brought me out a little bit, because I didn't see why you had to do that. It would have been much cooler if there was like a spirit hand from Michael, or you touched the words like he did with the gun and gave her a spirit gun. It would have been fine.
Sure.
Oh, nice. Sorry, Yellow. Yeah, you just said something, chat, about someone is actually making those blue flasks.
Yeah, it's our buddy Retina, I think, is he asked. So there you go.
Go follow Retina, everybody. It was actually... It's funny, because normally I have... In Resident Evil games, I have favorite sections. But both of these sections I liked for different reasons. Like, yeah, Castle D I liked because it was cool to learn of different ways how to avoid things, and the puzzles were cool. And it was it felt quick, even though it's actually quite a long adventure your first time through.
Yeah.
It felt just right for me. Yeah, that's what I have to say.
Nice. Kelsey, what did you make of the Return to the Castle?
I promise I'm going to say some good stuff in a minute. But before I do, I thought it was a little bit lackluster, the castle section. Gunplay, like, it's fine, like, and it's made really well. Like, it should be clear, it's perfectly playable. There's nothing wrong with it. I just kind of found it a little bit boring. There was a bit too much retread for me. Gunplay was a little bit too light. And again, it's a short DLC, so I'm not gonna hold it against it too much. There's no knife though, which that I am going to hold it against. That's kind of shocking. So no knife runs for anybody. The small degree of puzzles, I think I probably enjoyed them less than. I mean, there wasn't really puzzles. The entrance to the basement was obviously a great one with the statues. The rest of the puzzling was mostly just which direction do I look in and point, my powers. I'm currently playing both Scorn and Signalis, and the puzzles in both of those games are incredible. And it's not showing this DLC in a good light for me, and maybe that's like, recency bias, but I think the puzzles left a bit more to be desired. I thought the castle was a perfect opportunity for a few more puzzles, but I mean, the soul-sucking, the face-sucking enemies were really cool at first, and then they just all looked exactly the same, and I think we're sort of back to the molded territory where there's this really cool design, but it would have been nice to have,
variations.
Variations. Just
that's fair.
Give me one with 2 heads, like one with 6 arms, or whatever.
One with wasps coming out.
Yes, there you go. We could have done that. They became. They were fine. Like, I don't want to be too harsh on it. They were cool. You mentioned the noises they make, Si. That was great. The big new mechanic of using the powers to destroy cores works fine, but as I said, I have issues with the gimmick, but I think that's just because how it relates to the story, which we've covered. The big new enemy with the sort of melted faces and stuff, again, just a big lumbering brute with a big weapon. Seen it quite a lot before. I enjoyed playing it. I want to make that clear. I did enjoy playing it. I have no desire to play it again because I'll have to play through the castle section.
Okay,
so yeah.
In that case, I'm going to let you kick off the second half.
Cool.
Hopefully this is where the positives come in. The next stratum, if that's so called, of the Megamycete, where we return to House Beneviento, and just from immediately I was like, I had several oh no's, because the first one was like, please don't put me through that thing again. And secondly, among all the many things that freak me out, the first thing you see as you walk towards the place is this old-fashioned baby's pram that wheels out of nowhere by itself. I was already like, oh no, I don't like this at all. But yeah, I mean, Kelsey, how did you find what I think to be definitely the stronger part of the DLC on a first playthrough? Who knows if it holds up through many, many runs, but nonetheless, I found it especially striking.
Yeah. This is it. This is my highlight. Most of this section, I will say, I'll touch on something else in a minute, but like you said, just knowing where you are straight away was...
Puts the fear back in you.
Straight away. And after I'd sort of come away from the first half of the DLC feeling like, okay, this is kind of fun, it's not blowing me away. And then I got here, I was like, oh, here we go. And then you get to the gate, and you go through the gate, you get to the lift, and the lift changes as you go up, and it just opens the door into the house, and the giant monkey teddies are there. And I was just like, no, what's going to happen? So I had expectations, but already, I was confident that something good and scary was about to happen, so it sucked me right back in. And the atmosphere was amazing, loved it. The highlight, which I'm sure everybody's going to have thoughts on for me, is the Super Mario Boo's inspired walking dolls. This is just sort of the mannequins. Sorry, not dolls.
Yeah.
This is like, for me, this is what it's all about, and this is the gameplay section that presented something fresh. With the kind of walking backwards and being careful. It was a little bit of genius, and then to throw like more of them at you as well scared the crap out of me. It wasn't overly complicated, but it was hugely tense, and the lit up eyes, I tell you now, like, that made it even worse. This reminds me, I don't know if anybody's ever seen this, but there's a photo taken in the Amityville house, which is apparently a photo of a ghost of a young child, and its eyes are lit up like these mannequins. I would be surprised if that wasn't an influence for the design here, because it was so good. I'll try and find it later, but I think the fetus of Village for me had far more emotionally disturbing aspect about it, but this is up there. This is one of the scariest sequences ever in Resident Evil, easily. And yeah, I think it was incredibly effective. I would love to see Capcom pull out this atmosphere going forward, and not the sort of sparkly magic powers stuff. Just quickly then, the sort of subsequent section, Honey, I Shrunk the Rose, with all the little dolls, or big dolls, I should say. I was a bit mixed on that section. Lovely designs, some good atmosphere. The stealth stuff was fine to play, but I just would have liked a bit more, a bit more options to maybe distract the enemies, or rather than just wait and walk, a bit like traffic lights. So it was a little bit hollow, but I still really enjoyed it. So yeah, on a whole, gameplay was pretty good. I think that second half rescued it for me, although a bit shallow in parts. And it's a short DLC. Like, I hear myself complaining, it's like 2 or 3 hours. How much can they really cram in? So I'm not judging it too harshly. It was quite varied, but yeah, I loved the Beneviento stuff.
This is like a great example of like Capcom listening to the things that everyone was responding to about Village, but not just copy and pasting and being like, oh, we'll put 2 babies in.
Yeah.
That's how scary. That's how scary works, right? Like, the fact that we expect it, we didn't get it. Not just from my sanity, but for the sake of variety, was really good. And the Mia mannequin things were jumpy and terrifying, but also quite fun. Like, I was laughing with fright and having a good time, as opposed to the baby, which even today when I play through it, I curl up into a ball and want to die.
Agreed.
Whereas this is, I think I kept saying out loud when I was playing it, it's like, this is so good. I was, saying at the time, I can't wait till this DLC is out to see and hear everyone's reaction to this. Like, keeping quiet about this sort of the week that I got ahead of everyone on this was really tough, because I was so jazzed on this doll thing. It's a brilliant idea. Steve, what did you make of Spookyville Part 2?
I think, much like everybody else, it was like the second that you knew where you were, this is the path to the Beneviento house. Oh no. And the fact that, I was expecting pretty much a retread, and we get another escape room, which is, another little puzzle where you got to find the dolls, and learn, I suppose, a little bit about perhaps the people who are bullying Rose when she's growing up, maybe.
Sure, yeah.
A bit of lore, trauma, and a puzzle. It's nice. And and then you get to go up against the Weeping Angels from Doctor Who. As Mia. No real complaints. They actually, to say that this area feels like the most, like, we've just dumped a section from Village in terms of a location. They've got a lot out of it. Like, they managed to make a mechanical puzzle, a different kind of puzzle twice. Like, I'm pretty sure the area where you are teeny tiny Rose is actually the same area you were just in anyway.
Yeah, it is.
Turning that from a puzzle to then, was it red light, green light? We have to look at things and stuff. That whole puzzle thing, great. And then you've got, like, tactical espionage dolls. It just needs a bit of, like, a bit of tank hanger music playing in the background. You'd be fine. It's no real complaints. It's weird how mechanically it works. I was actually at first wondering, are we going to get a gunfight in the Beneviento house? And then the pushchair rolls past, and like that all went out the window. But still a scary, horrible place. And then it capped off with a not too stellar boss fight against Evie. I wasn't the first few fights with Evie, I wasn't realising you had to just crouch behind stuff. I was trying to move behind pillars and things. It just kept pasting me. over and over again. So I feel like that could have used a little bit of jank policing. So that as a cap of the whole experience, it's a shame because up until then it's fantastic. And the little, the jumping dolls and stuff, dolls don't really do anything for me. So the fact that just seeing their faces lean out of walls, peering at me like, this is a bit uncomfortable actually.
Yeah, that bit was great actually.
Yeah. I'll take it. Yeah. Just don't want to see a giant mirror ever again. I'm going to hear that squeaking in my sleep.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, you know what? My note on the Evelyn fight literally is it's a nice callback to the end of Resident Evil 7, but it's a bit more fun than the Evelyn boss fight of RE7 where you just run towards her. Only slightly, but I'll take it. Yeah. It isn't a whole lot better, but it is a little bit better, certainly. James, what did you make of the Return to the House?
Oh man, I loved it so much.
It's great.
As soon as I was fully immersed, I mean, this was like a sleep adult James as well at the time, because it was at about 5 a.m. in the morning. I wanted to play this game on release, right? So it was still dark outside, and I was like, I'm going to play, not expecting this at all. And then when I got to that section, I was like, oh, what are they going to do? They can't do the baby again. Because if they do the baby again, it's not going to scare me. I speedrun this game so many times. Like, the baby is nothing to me now. It's still one of the scariest things on first look, but yeah, and then they I mean, the reaction of my first reaction is out there on Twitter, where I just turn the corner, I see it, and I just go, oh. I immediately know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
As soon as I see those eyes. And also, you get a couple of messages. There's some messages you can't miss, by the way, guys. So make sure to check. I mean, if you want to be scared, that is. Make sure to check the walls as you're going around, because you get a buttload of foreshadowing before this. Like, there's a really cool scene where you're just, you're doing those the puzzle things, and then you come around a corner, and there is just back towards you, there is just a standing Mia mannequin. Yeah. Facing towards the lab.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, great. Fine. That's great. At the time, I was like, oh, they're just messing with me. I did not even think that they were going to do something with that. And then later on, you walk through into the lab and you get spooked by the mannequin literally as you walk in, and Rose even jumps, which made me jump. It was, and that's when I started to think, what... The way they work with tension is so fascinating, because they use the puzzle as the tension piece. Like, the puzzle is the taut string.
Yeah, it's very true.
So something bad is going to happen after this puzzle. You don't know when it's going to happen. You have an idea of when it's going to happen. And you have an idea from the original game, of where it could happen. But no, it doesn't happen at all in those places. The game is constantly throwing sounds at you everywhere, to try and spook you. So you're constantly turning around. Right, you go through a very long corridor from the lab to the breaker box, because that's what happens in the original game. You do that, run, and then the baby comes. So you're expecting the baby to come, but you get all the way to the breaker box, and then you click it, and it doesn't work, and you're like, oh, okay. And then there's a big message on the wall, and you're like, okay, go through there. And yeah, it was terrifying. I remember the first one, because I was like you, Sai, I started giggling out of fright. And then I started to try and imagine the route in my head of how I was going to get to where I needed to get to. Because basically it teaches you, or it tries to teach you how to play the game inverted. In terms of movement, which is really smart, because you're worrying about where to move. And then there's this bit where you find that you got 3 on you, and you're like, oh, great, that's fantastic. How am I going to run from these things? And they basically, when they grab you, they open their mouth really, really jarringly.
It's awful, isn't it?
Yeah. And then the peak of this whole thing was running backwards with these 3 mannequins following you, going through where the Angie doll normally is sitting on the ground, where the motif is in the original game, going through that door, and then turning around to go around the corner, and there's literally a mannequin on your right.
Yeah.
As you go through.
Yeah.
and you don't even hear it coming. And I think it's meant to be there just to scare you. It's literally like useless, that thing. But it was great. It was fantastic. Really fantastic way to use like a different. I'm not scared by dolls normally. Like dolls don't bother me really, right? But the way it moved was so terrifying. Like it would even when you looked at it, it would take like an extra half step.
Yeah. The movement is everything, isn't it? Like the sort of when you turn away and turn back, and it's halfway through a step, staring at you. You know.
And I remember going through the kitchen is where you have your first big opportunity where it can grab you because you have to basically run to the bedroom, and that's I remember doing that because if you take it slow and if you try and drag it into the kitchen, it's going to get you. You just have to run. Right, and I remember turning around and seeing it right in my face. Oh, terrifying! I got grabbed a lot during my first playthrough. Now, the next section again, I don't find dolls that terrifying. I thought the faces and like the giant faces, the way the camera panned to them was really great. It reminded me of Silent Hill 4: The Room, where there's a big face that comes out of a wall and just its eyes are like wiggling and stares at you. I can't remember her name. I think it's Maria or something.
Eileen Gavin.
Eileen. But yeah, it reminded me of that. It was great. But when it got to the actual section, it reminded me very much of Limbo or Little Nightmares.
Yeah.
That whole section, and I've not really ever been interested in those kind of games. I know that they're critically acclaimed and folks love them, but I've never been a big super fan of them because I've not really been a big super fan of just platformy games like that are scary and have puzzles. Like I don't, that, and that's all you can really do with them. And that's how I felt while I was doing the doll section. It felt a little bit like filler to me. Like you can that, and there was also like points where it was a bit redundant. It gave you the illusion of choice when it came to using your white birch. Like it was like, okay, yeah, you can still use your white birch on this, and you're gonna have to, by the way, but we're not gonna tell you that.
Yeah, true.
Right, it takes your agency away, and it was kind of meh, a little bit dumb. When the big Mia popped through the door, that terrified me again because I thought, oh god, if I don't look at it, is it good? But then I soon realized that no, it's just a patrolling enemy, and I was like, oh okay, So that was fine. It was fine. It just, I think it might speak to folks who have certain fears about dolls more, than it did with me. But the mannequin section is by far, I think, I know I'm not the only one here. I think that the mannequins are more terrifying than the baby, for me. My reaction to them was, whereas the baby was very bombastic and it was like, and my reaction was so visceral, like, in terms of how it came out, I felt a deep fear of these mannequins. Like it was like it was in a place I didn't realize. Like I looked at it and I realized what I had to do, and it was like suddenly it was a different kind of fear. Actually, I'll say it's a different kind of fear.
It is.
Than the baby.
It is different, yeah.
I don't know how to describe it, but
I think Kelsey, you said it best when it's like there's something emotionally.
The whole baby.
Thing.
The whole baby deal and what that's connected to is it's very upsetting and traumatizing. But the mannequins are, that's horror movie terrifying. It's
it was awful. But yeah, so I wouldn't say any is better than the other. They're just from different
right, for sure.
Fear stratums, if we're using the game's words. In terms of the ending, because I don't think we've spoken about the ending, in terms of gameplay, I didn't like the boss fight. It was, again, like the Executioner, it just felt very cookie cutter of, and let me tell you, by the way, guys, the keyboard and mouse controls for that fight are absolutely abysmal. They're terrible. If you've got a keyboard in front of you right now, I want you to press on your WASD keys, then I want you to press on E at the same time, and then try and press A and D at the same time while you're trying to aim and while you're trying to move forward and backwards.
That sounds fun.
It was not. I had to do that multiple times. The fight was dumb. I did like the aesthetics, but we'll go into that next, of the entire fight. I really, I meant, like a couple of folks mentioned earlier on about the lines. Miranda was saying there were some lines that were very throwaway, but there were some lines that were just so. Every time she says Eva or Ava, like, it rattles my bones. Like Miranda, every time she says that. And then there's also a line where she calls Ethan a pest.
Yeah, that was great.
It was such a good line. But the rest of it was kind of throwaway. Again, I love seeing Miranda anyway, so when I saw her, I was like, oh, fantastic, I love seeing you, but I wish it worked a little bit better for what we were. But then it kind of picked up again, because I seen Ethan, and Ethan was with us, and we were running with Ethan, so I was like, oh, forget about all that. Forget about you just picked up a non-metaphysical, physical crystal in a metaphysical world. We're running with our dad now. We're going to get to the end and we're going to win. That's kind of took over. So they did well there. Mm-hmm. I don't really have anything else to add.
Okay, cool.
I know I've said a lot.
Let's. You've definitely touched on some things that I want to talk about next in terms of. So the last thing in terms of Shadow of Rose, because we still got the other bits to get to. I'm sure we obviously have way less to say than we did for this. This is, as we say, the main course. So we definitely need to at least talk about the way that it looks and sounds, at least, to sum it up. I mean, we've all kind of touched on it a little bit. The cutscene direction in general is good throughout. For the most part, I really love, James, I think you mentioned it first, but then as well, when you're kind of chasing after Ethan and he's got the shotgun, he's kind of like silhouetted and all that feels really cool. The cutscenes later after that broke my immersion a little bit, because the ways they were finding to hide his face was kind of funny, which took me out of the emotional side of it, because I was like, yep, there's Ethan's arm that takes up most of the shot.
There's his chin.
Right, exactly. I can see his chin. Yeah.
With our powers combined.
But overall, I think the cutscene direction was good, and it's really nice to see Village a bit different, because obviously in the main game, all the cutscenes are from first person, because the entire game takes place from first person from the moment you boot it up. So it allows for some more dynamic scenes, like we get to see the Duke's knuckles up close and all this stuff, and like grabbing Rose by the face and stuff like that. And Steve, you said about asset reuse, in terms of other points that I want to make quick, is that, overall, pretty happy with it. The way they use the dolls in the house as part of a puzzle piece, and the Evelyn doll from RE7 I thought was really clever. The sort of tiny big island from Mario 64 was really good way to just like, here's a whole new level and we've literally just used the assets but just changed everything's proportion, was kind of cool. And again, we've all talked about how great the Mia mannequin was. It's an asset that exists in the main game. They just put it on a rig this time, a really good rig. Stuff like that. I was like, yeah, cool, I'm okay with this. It's familiar and new, and I'm happy with that kind of thing. Kelsey, how do you feel about the way the game looks and sounds?
I think we've said it before, like the RE engine is one of the best out there for cinematic games. I think particularly character models, it just sort of, blows me away with what they do with the characters. And, the glimpses we've had of RE4 Remake just look insanely good. And I think, although this DLC might not look quite as good as that, but it's very, very high level and a lot of it looks amazing. There's many screenshotable moments as well for the environments. I was using the photo mode lows. I think James touched on when you first walk out to you're up the hill with a village, and you see the skyline and stuff like that stuff. Although I got issues with the story, like it looks amazing. It's just my jaw dropped. So it's mostly first class. I think there's the atmosphere I talked about for the Beneviento house. I think there was a few odd moments which I think might have been the result of turnaround time, and this is another thing James mentioned which I saw. Some of the lighting and subsurfacing made Rose look plastic and look a bit weird, which is very uncharacteristic of an RE engine game. It just felt like some of that was a bit off. But that's just me being picky. There's like Rose has some weird strands of hair sticking out, which was super off-putting as well. But again, it's just, this is me looking for stuff to be picky about. The game looks amazing. The RE engine is probably my favourite out there. And yeah, not too much to say about the sound really. The monsters we've talked about, the face suckers were really good. The sound I sort of briefly mentioned earlier with the mannequins, the creaking of them walking is so good. I mean, kudos to whoever did that, because they nailed it. That was one of the creepiest parts, that and the eyes. Not too much else to say. Looks stunning, sounds amazing. The cackling laughter annoyed me, but again, it's just, I'll brush it away. Too much of it looks, the good outweighs the bad for the visuals and audio for me.
Yes, agreed. For as far as Miranda goes as sort of like hysterical villain, who knew the Duke was such a good Mark Hamill impersonator?
Wow.
There's one line actually that comes to mind when I see it now, and it's like, what is it? Your imminent demise is inevitable, or something. Those two words don't make sense, or something. Now.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Steve, what did you make of the aesthetics of the DLC?
Strong when it was trying to do its own thing. I feel like, when any parts where you could fully recognise where you were and there wasn't much like flavour to the environment to make it different, was a shame. Like, I loved the ballroom. I don't know where the piano was in the original. It's now like a puzzle where you have to shatter multiple pianos. I like the aesthetic, and it's how corroded, and it's got like mould going over the floor. The album cover aesthetic of the end area, like, amazing visually. The way that it all changes at the end when Rose gets her powers switched on into, like, it's Dragon Ball Z fight mode. Well, I don't know if the fight fits Resident Evil in general. Like, the aesthetics of it are really cool. Like, especially, and screenshot-wise, when they haven't got, like, an arbitrary reason to hide Ethan's face, like everyone said, it's pretty tidy, pretty well done. Honestly, I've got no real complaints. The only real issue aesthetically for me now is those face sucker monsters should really wear Rose's face when they kill you, just as a final creepy little thing. I feel like that would have been the perfect nightmare fuel to cap it off.
That's fair. James, any final thoughts on visual and audio design?
I mean, we've mentioned like the problems, and they're pretty glaring, especially when you're in elevators for some reason. I don't like Rose being in an elevator. I think there's too much overhead lighting coming down. Now, I mentioned this during the DLC stream that I did, but I think we're at a point right now graphically with hair where we can make hair look really dope, like in video games, but people don't have the hardware to make it look dope.
Yeah.
Right. And it's been like a real problem. I mean, we had that point with fire, we had that point with water. Now we've done fire really good, we've done water really good, but next we've got to do hair, guys. Okay, developers, we're gonna figure it out, because it's, with a game that looks as good as RE Village, when you have just one thing that sets it apart, like hair, it can really ruin kind of your story, or your journey through the story.
Yeah.
Yes.
We need to figure something out, because it's getting stupid now. Like, I can look at Rose's face and go, in one light, and she looks so freaking real, and then I see like glitches in her hair, clipping through stuff. But I put a note here saying that the best era graphically, and it's because it was so dark, was, even though it's my least favorite area, was the dolls section, like as Kelsey put it, the Honey I Shrunk the Mia, or Honey I Shrunk the Rose. Section. Like, it looked really good. It looked fantastic, and it's because they used a darker shade. It's very easy to hide graphical errors and glitches when you have a darker shade, which is what they do a lot in horror. Audio, the face eaters, the sound they make when they're sucking Rose's face, shadows of Rose's faces off, right, or even when they're sucking Rose's face off, is horrific. And I really hope they're used but built on in future stuff, because they're still terrifying. And every time I played it 4 times now, and it's still terrifying every time. I do not want to be caught by these things. They really like unnerve me when they do when they do catch you. Other than that, asset reuse. So there, I had a little look around while I was doing my hardcore run. I was going to every room and I was noticing some cool things when it came to asset reuse. So as you're walking around, like, I don't know if you guys felt this, other than a couple of rooms, like the big main hall and stuff, the rooms, all of the rooms, the little rooms you can go to have changed slightly.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, and it when you go into them, they feel similar, but they also feel a bit foreign. And like one big example was, you know, the room where you have to shoot the 4 or 5 bells. In that room is a big one because the far wall where there's normally like a big clock swinging is just a big wall with paintings on it now. And there is also a window where you shoot the 5th bell. That has been completely walled off now. You know, there's a bunch of like little things like that which make it familiar but unfamiliar at the same time. I also love that the way I guess it kind of fits into visual. A lot of the game hedges on you playing the original game, like Village, and that's, you know, of course you're going to be able to do that, but it's nice because it doesn't treat you like an idiot at times. Like, because there's a point where the game tells you to go to the basement. Right now, to any person that looks at that message, oh, we need to go downstairs. No, you don't go downstairs. You go on the first floor, and you go to your right when you're coming out the stairs. Yeah. You have to go that way because that's the first time. And, you know, if you played the game, it's just cool because it's like, it doesn't treat you like a fool. It's like, you know how to get to the basement. And the reason you know how to get to that basement is because that's the first time you get attacked by the sisters properly. Yeah. Right? And it's like, that is ingrained in your mind. I just found that pretty cool. You know, there were certain points that didn't treat you like a fool, and then there were points like the cookie cutter fights where it did a little bit. But yeah, the mannequins were a standout when it comes to audio. The dolls sounded fine. They sounded like they were meant to be scary dolls. It didn't really, yeah. The sounds of the gore as well. Like, if the dolls caught you and they just stopped stabbing you, it was like, that was pretty cool. Yeah. Other than that, not really got much more to say in terms of audio and visual that other people haven't said.
I think actually it's really good you reminded me, talking of like small details. I didn't write this down, but I at least wanted to make mention of this. When you're talking about stuff that's sort of tucked into rooms, it's interesting, and it kind of plays into what we were saying about how it's, I don't really know where the line is in the house. Is it always Evelyn? Is it Angie up to a certain point and then Evelyn shows up? Because it kind of feels like it could be Evelyn the whole time because it's the same voice actor. For us, obviously that's something that we can know for sure by like looking at other versions and seeing which voice actors they use. But the whole thing was quite interesting because obviously you come across all these like drawings and stuff, and whether that's on paper or on the walls, which is quite Evelyn. And there's a particular moment that I actually avoided this on my first playthrough, didn't even clock it, but on my second, as you're going towards the sort of main room where you would have previously done the mannequin puzzle in the original game, there's a painting of Rose as she is now. She even remarks on it if you go past it. And then when you come back through that way, and whoever has drawn all over the walls, they've like drawn across her eyes.
I never noticed that.
Yeah, when you come back through, there's just like her eyes are all crossed out and stuff, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then the next time, there's no painting at all.
It's nice.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's a really neat little thing. Again, which, James, perfect proof. Like, you might not have necessarily seen that, but it's there for you to discover. Yeah. So I love stuff like that.
You just reminded me as well. Like, that is another reuse of assets, but not even in Village. That's a reuse of assets in RE7.
It might well be the same drawings. Who knows? Yeah,
because it's like as I was going through there, I was like, I didn't verbally say it, but I was thinking, I recognize these drawings. In my head, I'm thinking the game's trying to tell me that these are Rose's drawings, but I can't put my finger on it, right? But these don't feel. And then when Evelyn popped, I was like, okay, yeah, these are from RE7. I recognize seeing these kind of drawings in RE7. Yeah.
It would seem at some point during my experiments with consciousnesses, an intruder made herself at home in my realm. This intruder was none other than the failure, Evelyn. Had Evelyn not interfered, Rosemary Winters would have been on the verge of despair, dispossessed of her will to live and her Megamycete powers. Instead, a new passion burns within her, and I shall have to extinguish it.
Let's talk about the other two bits. We won't spend nearly as much time on them because they are kind of additionally extra cool, nice little bits and pieces. Let's start with the Mercenaries additional orders, which introduces 3 new playable characters to the Mercenaries: Chris Redfield, Lady D, and Heisenberg, and a couple of new sets of maps as well. Plus a kind of like checklist of things you can do with a few associated rewards. I think for me, this is a really worthy addition in the sense that, or maybe not, but like this is what Mercenaries should have been from the off. Like in the base game, it was fun, but it was just kind of like, well, there's not a lot to it. Whereas, especially coming off the back of the fact that we did a podcast earlier this year on Resident Evil 4's additional modes, including the Mercenaries, this was a lot more in line with that, where it's just like, here's a bunch of characters, they've all got their own loadouts, they're all wacky, they're actually all kind of OP, the new ones, but they're fun to play as, you know, Chris going around punching things, instantly available, and you have to unlock the other two. Obviously, right from the off, you're like, okay, this is big, dumb fun, and I like it. Steve, have you had much chance to play the Mercenaries?
Today, yeah, but I have lacked on my my Mercenaries playing a village, because after the initial release, I was like, oh, this isn't like the Mercenaries I remember, and now I basically neglected it. So unfortunately, I've had to spend most of the day trying to unlock everything. I haven't unlocked anyone of the normal characters, so I've only got Chris and Ethan. But the difference is staggering. To say that Chris has basically got a few new moves, i.e. 2 melee moves and stamps and stuff, it adds a lot of flavour and charm. And if the other characters also have their own unique spins on it, I can see why it would be the way to go. I hope if RE4 follows the same route, making each character distinct in a similar way, it's going to pay dividends. It's definitely the right framework. I feel like the arenas are obviously still the weird raid mode courses that they were before. But
right.
The character flavouring is good. From what I've seen of Lady D and Heisenberg, obviously Chris, you know, this is the moment where you turn the game soundtrack down and you put the Doom music on. Because that boy rip and tear until it's done. It's fun. I'm going to have to pass on Heisenberg, Lady hands-on though. I haven't played them myself.
That's fair. You're right, it's good because you're right in the sense that you feel like you're playing as Chris Redfield from the end of Village, i.e. just tearing through enemies. So I'm really glad they didn't turn that down particularly. He is just ridiculous. And yeah, good fun to play as, certainly. Kelsey, what's your experience been with the new version of the Mercenaries?
It's really, really good. I think it's, like you say, it feels like the proper Mercenaries mode now. It's fleshed out. There's a bit more variation in attacks and characters. I would have really liked, though, the fact that I've paid for this to all the characters to just be unlocked straight away, which might feel like a cheeky thing to ask for, but I still haven't unlocked Lady D, because although it's slightly easier, you've still got to do it, and I haven't had the time to do it.
Some of them are quite long, the maps, to be fair. One of them's 5 maps in a row. It's eesh.
Yeah, to get Lady D, you have to get an S rank on the Village of River of Blood River,
right? Okay,
Blood,
Bloody River,
yeah, the Bloody River, that one. Yeah, I really like Mercenaries mode. I played the Mercenary mode when Village came out quite a lot. I have this weird relationship with it where it's quite stressful to play, but I like it, and it's definitely a mode that you can practice and you know chase the better score and stuff. I think the replay value is really, really good. Losing your combo really upsets me, but I like it. It's a really good experience. I'm really looking forward to trying Lady D. I thought Heisenberg's quite a cool character to play as well. James gave me a recommendation for getting an S rank with Chris, which worked like a treat. Maxed out his pistol, did that today. So I S-ranked not the Bloody River, the other one, the Bloody Village. Yeah, it's really, really good. Very pleased with this. I mean, I don't want to sound spoiled, but it's it'd be nice if there was a couple of other characters on the way, but, as well, because I just feel like as a mode, they could do so much more. And I don't know if it was Steve that mentioned this, but with Resident Evil 4 Remake coming out, could this just be the base Mercenaries mode now, and they just port everything over from Remake 4 and add to it? Because, we could have a Mercenaries mode forever now. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think about. The only thing about it for me is like the maps are kind of samey, like throughout. The new ones are good. Like the river in particular is obviously quite nice because it's totally different to the rest. But mostly it is just kind of like, some places from the campaign just kind of over and over again. Sometimes you're running through them in sort of reverse direction, but other than that, it's kind of like, but yeah, Heisenberg's an interesting one for me because. All of these new characters feel OP, to be fair, and Heisenberg's in a weird patch where I just basically just use the hammer and then a little bit of scrap for long range because he can't hit anything otherwise. Maybe the odd soldat jet, but like he's got this weird like magnetic field, and I was like, I don't find myself ever using it. I don't need it. The hammer just cleaves through everything, and I find Lady D to be similar in that she's just ridiculous. All of these characters just mow through enemies. James, what's your experience been with the Mercenaries and, as you put it, like the gremlin sounds of Lady D?
So I think this game and this, I think Gold Edition is worth it purely to hear Maggie Robertson scream like a gremlin.
It is fun.
When she gets her thrill meter to the max, it's so funny and so... it feels so good. However, I have some critical things to say when you go into the more hardcore. I got S rank on the first hardcore new map, and I got triple S on the second yesterday. And no, don't play Lady D or Heisenberg on them. Just play Chris.
Okay.
Because the problem that you've got is that everything hits so hard in hardcore that, if you are playing Lady D or you're playing Heisenberg, which are predominantly melee characters, right, then you're probably going to die fairly quickly unless you get like the adrenaline or something like that, which gives you HP with every attack and things like that. Like you can probably have some fun with that. But I'm not to say I didn't use melee attacks with Chris, because I did use straight jab. It was mainly only using straight jab on big creatures. But I think Chris is by and far the most OP character in additional orders, just because of that. Like the other two are very fun, and they're, and I would have liked it if this is gonna sound wild. I would have liked it if you completed like S rank or double S or whatever with those characters. I would have liked it if then you could play the main game as them, right? Or Chris.
I don't think that would work, but it would be fun.
Maybe make Lady D slightly smaller or something. I don't know, but it just would have been fun. Like, because the problem with this DLC and this Gold Edition is that it's clearly meant to be for to bring new people into the game. Because I literally find no use about the things that I've unlocked. Like, if you complete, if you get at least 25 S ranks or something, like you unlock. Quote special customizations, which are these passive bonuses to your guns.
That's in the main campaign.
Yeah, that's in the story mode.
Yeah.
And that's every gun other than special guns. So Chris's guns and like the ones you unlock, like the stake and the PZ hand cannon and stuff like that. Everything else gets like a little passive thing. Like the shotgun, like the M1917 gets a point blank passive. Which does more damage the closer you are to something. Like the grenade launcher gets a wider AoE area of effect. It also seems to fire straighter, I feel like. And like the V61 fires faster. They get like, but that's useless to me.
Yeah.
Because I've completed the game. I've 100%ed it now. So it's there for folks who want an easier time getting hardcore in, and Village of Shadows. And stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
So the Gold Edition is mainly for newer players, which is fine. It would have been nice to have these things from the off, more customizations. But as Kelsey said, I honestly think that they're just testing ground here, and they're just mounting a foundation to what RE4 is going to become, which is why they haven't put too much work into Mercenaries itself. In terms of the maps, they're fine. Like that you were saying earlier on, they take too long. Like there's literally one map in like the second map of the new ones, Bloody River. Is it? Yeah, Bloody River.
Yeah, it's only two, I think, isn't it?
There's one. No. There's like 4 maps.
Oh, okay.
But there's one that has 100 enemies on it. Like, and it's like, holy. But if you do well with the other two, and I'm going to tell a little trick here, if you do well with the other two or the other 3, how many ever it is, right? Then by the time you've got about 25, 30 enemies killed, you've got your triple S. Like, it's a bit silly. Now the trick is on hardcore. I don't know why they did. Maybe because they were like, just had a little bit of fun. They give you this like super powered Dragoon. With every bullet, it does 500 damage. To put into perspective, the average Dragoon does 110.
That is weird,
right? Rip and tear.
And they give you
rip and tear.
Yeah, exactly.
And they give you this Dragoon that you can buy for 25 grand, right? That, I mean, it has limited ammo, right? So basically, what your tactic is use your pistol on your small enemies, and then just use the Dragoon on the Varkalak or the jets or whatever. Right, and just mince through stuff. You get it easy. It's not even hardcore when you get that thing. It's just easy core at that point. I mean, I'm just going to echo everybody else said. We should have got this right at the beginning, and I would have had way more fun with Mercenaries. I mean, I did have fun anyway, but yeah, it could have been something more.
Well, talking of fresh playthroughs and people that might be coming to the game for the first time, I think that might also be accurate for the final piece of this puzzle, which is the third-person perspective. If you're not interested in playing through the campaign again, this will have really no use for you, but obviously it's an entrance point for a lot of people who haven't been able to play the game before for accessibility reasons and stuff like that. And I think before we even really get into necessarily what we think of how it feels, I think we can probably all be in agreement that this is just good that it exists for that reason, and also something that personally I didn't think was really ever going to happen. There was a lot of talk where it's like, add a third person mode to this first person game, and maybe I was too harsh to kind of like shrug that off. It's been directed this way for a reason. It's probably not going to happen. Offering multiple perspectives must be really hard work for the way you want to direct your game. And I don't know, it seemed like a big challenge, and Capcom's devs have described this as basically like making a whole new game, which I guess kind of like makes sense. I was overall a big fan of this. I won't necessarily get into my specifics right away, but James, have you played through, outside of Shadows of Rose, but have you played through the campaign at all in third person?
Yeah, I did some gun testing, and I did a full playthrough.
Right.
In third person, and it's fine. Yeah, it's good. Like it's like I remember it being announced, and I remember a lot of people on Twitter like getting up in arms about it. Like, and then when they played it, they're getting up in arms about it being a little bit chunky and like a little bit like clunky at some points is what I meant to say, not chunky. That's what the Duke is. But yeah, it's not there. Like I feel like the way it like transitions from Ethan's eyes to cutscenes and stuff like is kind of cool. You also get to see some like extra content, because you get to see rather than the lichens like just you zooming in and seeing the lichens chomp on your neck, you get to see them chomping on your neck from a third person's perspective. As well as like other stuff as well, other animations. They've really done a lot of work with the third person, and we did need it. And I'll be really, really happy with Capcom if they build this into future Resident Evils. It needs to be a choice that people can have. For accessibility reasons. We want more people to play these games, right? So you create more modes so people can play them. Like there's people who are fans of the Resident Evil series and have been for like a couple of decades, and they haven't even played RE7 because it doesn't have first person. And they keep hearing from people, they keep hearing from people, RE7 is the best thing that's happened since the trilogy, and they can't play it because they get motion sickness, and or they get or they have other problems, while playing. They can't immerse themselves into a first-person experience, which is, I completely understand that. If people have like criticisms like that, which aren't hugely detrimental to the game itself, it should be listened to, and Capcom have done that. So yeah, I hope they give in the future. I hope they give future games more choice in that regard. I mean, we used to have it all the time. Actually, now I think on it, we used to have like this kind of choice all the time in video games.
I mean, that is true. There are many games out there from certain genres and certain eras where you just click a button and it kind of goes in and out.
Yeah. Like it was just a regular thing, but now it's like, oh no, so it has to be first person, it has to be third person. It's like, no, it doesn't. It never used to be, so it doesn't need to be. Like, just that's why these people love those games.
If you permit me the snooty voice, it's an artistic decision, and we are going to stick to it for the sake of it because marketing reasons.
Yeah, like thing is, I've had this. I'm not going a little. I am going to go on a rant actually. So, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Demon Souls, like
in first person, James, I'm sold. Let's go.
No, wait. I'm going on one here, right? I remember having had a disagreement with somebody online about artistic choice, and it was due to the difficulty of those games.
Yeah, I knew that was coming.
And like as a veteran of those games, like I love those games and what they offer, right? It makes no sense that you want less people to play your game because of artistic choice. It's like you're literally making a choice to not give these people choices and not give yourself money if you don't add like a story mode or something.
Yeah.
Like you understand, like you just need to add a story mode and the regular mode. That's all you need to add. People want to experience your game. Like, and it goes the same with RE. Like, let people experience your game. Let people experience your game how they want to play it. And we have the capabilities. Capcom has the money, so let it happen.
I mean, with some of those games, not to get completely off track, but like if someone gave me like a tourist version of Bloodborne where I could just admire the aesthetics and wander around, and
right.
soak in the ambiance of a cursed Yharnam, I'd be for that. Yeah.
Like a creative mode in Minecraft. Where you can just float around and look at stuff. Like, in fact, more games should have that. But I think developers are probably a little bit scared of that, even though we have third-party programs that do it already.
I think you're right, though. To get to the fine point of it, as you say, hopefully this becomes something that Capcom can, now that they've done it, they can consider it for a future game. And it might not be Remake 4, but it might be Resident Evil 9 or something like that. Certainly, the fact that it's an option now is good, certainly. Kelsey, how did you feel about the third-person inclusion? Have you had a chance to play at all yet?
Yeah, I played it for a couple of hours. Works great. Like, I think any sort of opinion I have on it is just overridden by, like you said, the kind of unbelievable fact that it exists, that they did do it. And it's amazing that it exists, I'm so glad it does. It works great. I think from a technical standpoint, it's definitely more difficult to go from a game that was rendered in first person back to third person, because first person allows you to hide loads of stuff. Like if you watch Tear Aparts, you'll see that legs are missing and arms are missing and stuff, because you don't ever need to see this stuff in first person. So they probably had a bit more work to do, but that's just neither here nor there, really. Like, that's part of the process. I'm sure they've opened up the game to loads more people by doing this. It's amazing that it exists, and nothing else really to say. It works great. Liked it.
Yeah, I played through the entire game once with it, and I'll probably do it again for one specific reason. Yeah, but overall, shockingly, it feels right to me. Not like in a way that it's like, this is the way that it always was. Like, you can tell that this is the other mode, partly because of that sort of like, zapping in and out of Ethan's eyes with the cutscenes. But doesn't feel like a lacking mode at all. I enjoyed it quite a lot like this. It changes up the combat in interesting ways for someone who's played through Village multiple times. Spatial awareness is definitely a thing now, and makes you, I don't know, it just makes you approach combat differently. You can dodge more, And it actually, for me specifically, made the knife more viable because I could kind of see more around me and I knew when to move back a little bit easier, which I always struggled with in first person. So maybe I can finally do that knife run challenge, which is the last thing I've got to do. So that was nice. There are no major changes to the game at all. The only bit is that the tank part is in first person still, which I kind of understand. That will be that. I mean, I think it is possible to have done that in third person. It's a shame that it didn't, but I can also see that would have been a whole other set of challenges. But once you get out of the tank with the Heisenberg boss fight, it goes immediately back into third person as it should. Steve, have you had a chance to play through third person at all?
Yeah, but perhaps why I'm lacking in Mercenaries mode experiences because I've been basically just going through the main campaign again. It feels, oddly enough, like you said, it's adjusted my playstyle considerably. Like, I'm one of those people who touts the fact that Ethan can block the sun if you give him enough effort and time. Well, now I don't need to. I can dodge it.
I don't think... It's funny you said it because when we were talking about how Rose couldn't guard in Shadows of Rose, it made me think, I don't think I used the guard button at all on my playthrough in third person because I didn't think about it because it's not in Remake 2 and 3, so my brain forgot about it.
Exactly. Like I haven't got as far as Heisenberg, so I was really looking forward to seeing the animation where he like catches Sturm's blades and throws them because it's such an insane moment in first person. We've already spoken about the switching back and forth from first to third in cutscene wise. I understand why it's there because you have to redo the entire frigging cutscene, and that's like dev time and money that's just not worth being spent. It is jarring, but it's acceptable for the actual gameplay experience, and I generally feel a bit more manic. I wonder if this is just generally how I'm going to feel for RE4 now. I think what we've all said about accessibility is 100% true. And if Capcom ever do dare tread and go, we're not going to remake RE7, Jesus Christ, do not remake RE7. But if you ever do need to have a reason for new people who've already bought it to buy it again, some kind of gimmick mode with a third-person camera for RE7 would round out the set if you do it like this. This is less hacky and jank than the RE2 mods of the inverse, where you would go to first-person Leon and Claire and Jill. So
yeah, sure.
Very well done. It's surprising, really. It feels a lot fresher for me, and I know it's just a camera angle change, Steve, but it genuinely, I'm having a great time with it in third person.
Cool. All right, fantastic. Okay, so let's wrap it up. Let's give our conclusions on Shadows of Rose. What did you think of it as an overall package? Let's try and keep it spoiler for 3 for the people that might have skipped the vast majority of this podcast and just listened to the Mercenaries and third person. But what do we think of it as a DLC package? Did we think it's a worthy addition to Village, so on and so forth? Steve, why don't we start with you? What's your final thoughts?
Genuinely, it's a complicated mixed bag, but mostly enjoyable. I think my main issues with it come purely from a narrative that is far-flung and removed from the core Resident Evil narrative anyway. It's like 16-odd years in the future, centered entirely around that. So if the narrative issues were completely swept away, it's perfectly fine. Like I think it's probably the most sizable bit of content. I mean, if this was of another era like RE7, it would have been like several different bits put together, which this does feel like in a way. But for what you get, it's enjoyable, it's sizable. Mercenaries is going to probably be where you spend most of your time. If not, welcome to your first time playing Village. Now it's in third person. They did a really good job, excluding the cutscene switching, but you're going to have to grit teeth and bear it. I can't talk more about Shadows of Rose because spoilers, but it's okay. The horror atmosphere is really strong. I feel like if Capcom finally wants to bite the bullet and do a new Haunting Ground, they have the framework now.
Yeah. Cool. Kelsey, what are your final thoughts on the Winters expansion?
I think, despite like my criticisms, it's awesome. Like, it's a great expansion. It's completely worth the money. I think the package you get with the DLC is incredibly good value. The production standard is really high. I think the replay value of Mercenaries mode is fantastic. And just my issues were like Steve, just with the story. It bent the shark a bit too much for me. Felt like I wasn't really playing a Resident Evil game, but it's just a personal thing. What was there functioned perfectly well as a game. I know I sort of said earlier that I probably wouldn't play it again, but this conversation's definitely brought me round, and I'll go and play it again. I need to get the hardcore achievement anyway, so yeah, as an experience, there's loads to take from it. It's a really substantial DLC. Story's not the direction I want Resident Evil to go, but wow, that's just me. Like third person mode is great as well, and I think if Last of Us can get remade, then Capcom can add third person to Resident Evil 7, so let's make that happen. Definitely play it. It's really good. It's worth the money. Issues with the story, but I enjoyed my experience of the DLC.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with both you guys, certainly. Even, again, I also have issues with some of the story direction, but as I said, I can sort of forgive it because it's its own little pocket thing, and, I expect that it's going to stay that way, potentially. I guess we'll see. But as an experience, despite the fact that I ragged on the narrative, but as a complete experience, I did enjoy Shadows of Rose. That is a worthy sort of core part of the experience, and it's kind of funny because we had a lot of praise for RE7's DLC, which did a lot of different things and tried out a lot of stuff, and this is a similar level for me if I was doing a sort of tier death experience for DLC, and that's a brilliant idea, so I write that one down. I think that it's just as good, but in it's different ways, where there's a lot of they clearly looked at what was sort of missing from Village and targeted some specific things, like the request for a third-person mode, like the complaints that the mercenary mode, as you put it, was very lacking, and this hanging story thread about Rose that they weren't maybe necessarily actually going to come back to, for all we know. So they've definitely approached it, I think, in the right way, and yeah, it's a worthy package indeed. I'm very happy with it. James, final thoughts?
We've arrived. I put down in my notes is it the DLC we needed? No. Is it the DLC we wanted? Also, kind of no. But is it a worthy game to play for new Resident Evil fans? Yes.
I think it's not to get in your way, but yeah, I think Village Gold Edition, when they're this is the complete edition. It feels like the complete edition, right? If you're going to pick up Village and you haven't before, you'd be silly not to get this version.
Yep, definitely. It is, for a new, in fact, just because of what I experienced and the new stuff you get, I am even more inclined to recommend this game to people now. New people to the game, even people who don't know Resident Evil. I feel like you could play this game
absolutely,
and it stand alone. I think that's kind of a strength with all Resident Evils, to be honest, that you could do that with any Resident Evil, and even with the DLC, you could play it on its own and kind of have a good idea about what's happening.
Yeah, there's only a couple things there to RE7 that would be confusing, but I guess you can take that as clearly I need to explore
exactly.
Series,
It wants you to explore more. It wants you to learn more. It's really not what we all wanted as a DLC. We wanted, even though we don't like it very much, we wanted Ada Wong. I wanted more information about the Lords.
Right.
I wanted more information about the Megamycete. We did get some information. But yeah, it's definitely a worthy play. I've put additional hours. I think it's about 12 hours into this DLC, including the Mercenaries, including third person, and including the DLC so far. The DLC, it all cost me £15, so it's almost paid for itself. So if we're going to think of it that way, it's kind of. But again, you got to remember that I have completed everything. I've done everything, and I've also, in the base game, I've got over 100 hours in it. So it's definitely worth it if you look at it in that regard.
I think you're right. Yeah, it depends on obviously what you're looking to get out of it. If you're not going to play through the campaign again, third-person mode probably isn't going to do anything for you because you're not going to play through the game. If you're not interested in the Mercenaries, then you're probably not going to get anything out of that, which just leaves Shadows of Rose, which again, controversial perhaps storyline-wise, and maybe even gameplay-wise. But yeah, as long as you know what you're getting yourself into, as you said, James, quite rightfully, as someone coming to Resident Evil Village for the first time, this is, the complete version, certainly. Well, nothing else remains for me but to thank our contributors, our Patreons, and our listeners. Join the First Aid Spray Discord server to become part of our community and hear the show early and unedited. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, etc. All of these links and all of our content can be found at faspraypod.com. You can listen to the podcast live on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, and all good podcasting apps. And if you like what you hear, please do leave us a review where you can and spread the good word. Don't forget you can support the show by picking up some merchandise or at patreon.com/FASprayPod for as little as $1 a month. On our next episode, we conclude our year the same way we always do, with all the fun and goodwill of the quiz. Controversy, confusion, and a chase for the crown will ensue in Trivia Challenge Round 4. Thank you to the panel. You can follow all of the Pueblo people individually. I'm at Siniac_123. Steve is at FB Steve Was Taken. James is at Moist Owlets OFF. And Kelsey is at K_D_B_. And finally, thank you for listening and have a good week.
Well, I think James might be onto something if we go full tinfoil hat for a second and just let's go to the nth level degree. Okay, so they're an umbrella-based wasp nest, which means that these shadow men face eaters are in fact effigies based around Miranda's hatred of Spencer. There we go.
I like it.
Yeah, also, let us not forget the importance of the word nest in the RE engine. This is the real Nest 3, except it's a wasp nest.
Yeah.
RE9 is going to be nothing but wasp enemies. Everyone get the newspapers out.
Yeah.
Right, on that bombshell.
The whole game is like Chris running around with an open glass full of lager, trying to keep it away from. He's at a picnic. There's wasps everywhere. It's a nightmare.